today, and I get a chance today to reconnect with a dear friend of the program. Be tearing it up on the bandstand tonight. John Stowell, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, great to be with you, Jake. And my first time in the Century Room here in Tucson, where you live. It looks like a great club, and we have a nice trio tonight with Arthur and Arthur Vint and Chris Finet. Arthur books the room. He's a great drummer, I'm told. I haven't played with him yet.
You guys are it's gonna be a special night.
Yeah, Chris and I have some history. He runs the jazz program at NAU and Flagstaff and teaches and works all over the area. And we played the other night in Phoenix at Jazzbird, the Ravenscroft, with Dom Moyo, who you might know. Dom plays here. So I'm sure it's going to be a nice evening tonight, too.
I wanted to ask you about, this is really important. Can you just talk about the legacy of Link Chamberlain?
I'd be happy to. So Link was an unsung hero, kind of by choice. He chose to spend most of his energy teaching, although he was playing some gigs when I first was studying with him with people like Dave Liebman, Frank Ficcari, Michael Moore at small clubs in Connecticut and New York. And he was born and raised in southern Connecticut, where he lived all his life, basically. So I came to him pretty green in my early 20s, and I still credit him for a lot of the things that I still use in my own teaching. Even though I don't sound anything like him, he really gave me a great...
Well, give me some examples.
In terms of how I sound different from him?
No, the
things he gave me?
Yeah.
Well, his approach to the modes of the melodic minor, for instance. He had a special way to describe them as keys, and I still use that approach, and I always credit him at workshops. And his son Scott actually was a great young tenor player as a kid, and Scott and I reconnected about 5 years ago. He's still playing well, and I hadn't seen Scott probably in 40 years. So I live in Portland, Oregon, but I'm from the Northeast, and I still get back periodically. So Scott found us a little gig. I'm really happy that Scott's still playing. So Link taught probably for 20 years and died much too young of leukemia in his mid-40s. But I still credit him for really giving me a great foundation.
You know, the other cat is, let me see here.
My other teacher was a man named John Mahegan.
Mahegan, dude,
Yeah.
did the guy was cutting albums on Savoy Records.
Yeah, John came up
He
probably
was
in
a
the early
bad
50s.
man.
He came up probably in the early 50s and knew everybody in New York. And when I met him, he had moved out to Connecticut and eventually was teaching at Yale. He also, I think, taught at Juilliard and wrote some of the very first jazz theory books, probably in the 1950s. So I met him when he was playing a small restaurant gig in Fairfield, Connecticut, with a bass player. And I was good enough just to stay out of his way and give him a little bit of a break from soloing all the time. So I sat in with him for free for about 2 years on weekends and went for the occasional lesson. So that really helped me in terms of learning some standard repertoire, getting a notion of theory and how it worked. So between John and Link, I got a pretty good foundation in my early 20s.
Dude, those are the two stone geniuses. I was not hip to Mahegan.
Yeah.
He did an album with Kenny Clark and Charles Mingus.
I have not heard any of his recordings. I bet it was good, huh?
I haven't really done a deep dive. I was like, who is...
Kenny
you know,
Clark
I'm
and
obsessed
Charles
with
Mingus.
Link.
Wow.
You know,
Okay.
Mingus and Kenny Clark. I mean,
Wow.
that's a pretty sophisticated...
That's a pretty good rhythm section. Indeed.
Do you feel like... where do you feel like at this point you still are challenging yourself, pushing yourself beyond what you know?
Oh, every day is a new day as a student of the music. So I think if I'm lucky, my best.
Give an example as a
student.
student, a scholar of the music.
Well,
still a student.
Yeah, sometimes it's knowing what not to play and leave some intentional space to allow the conversation to happen. Legato versus staccato, awareness of dynamics, honoring the song when you're soloing, being able to tune into the folks that you're playing with so it feels like a real conversation. Those are all things that take a lifetime of work and study and playing. And I think if I'm lucky, my best work feels like it still could be ahead of me, although I've been playing this music for 50 plus years, all over the world on a shoestring with my friends, and still feels like small progress year to year in terms of what I'm able to do. Maybe not so noticeable to other folks, but I feel like I still have some evolution happening in my playing on a kind of a subtle level at this point.
One guy I wanted to touch on, I didn't realize he lived down in South Arizona before, when he passed, was Paul Horn.
Yeah, I played some with Paul.
Well, I wanted you to talk about. I know
Sure.
you and Brother Friesen were cooking it, and
We
then
were.
how'd you meet? How'd you connect with Horn?
I met him through David. Here's a little side note, by the way. David Friesen and I played for the first time in about 15 years a week ago in Salem, Oregon, with his regular drummer Charlie Doggett, and David's still playing well in his early 80s, and I think we're going to play some more together. We had a really good time.
that makes me feel so freaking.
David's down here pretty. David will be here again in February. I'm not sure if he'll get to Tucson, but he's in Phoenix, and maybe he'll.
Zona's a big place.
He's still playing out. He's still.
That's so
out there,
beautiful,
still doing
man.
well. Anyhow, David initially called up Paul Horn and introduced himself, and they started doing some duets, and then Paul had a connection with Ghost Concert, which was the Russian state concert agency, who was bringing some Russian acts to Canada. Paul at that point had landed immigrant status in Canada, having lived in Vancouver Island for a while. So the Ghost Concert agency brought Paul in a group over to Russia when it was still the Soviet Union in '83. So the group was David and Paul, because they were playing at that point. Paul's son Robin in his early 20s playing drums, and me. So that was my first time in Russia with Paul and David. And then Paul and I did a few other things with David, and then Paul and I did some duets in the early 90s. And Paul was a sweet man. And lots of amazing stories about reinventing himself when his career would take little left turns, like playing in the Taj Mahal, and
Right.
I think some of the first
Pyramids,
New Age music,
right.
playing for the Dolphins and meditation. But at heart, he was still a jazz player and a great guy.
Were you guys playing like undefinable music? You weren't playing standards.
We played some standards. We played some world music stuff. I'm trying to remember what we did on those early tours, but we played. As I recall, we played.
You
one or
played
two
rarer
Yeah,
standards.
maybe more rare, but also some well-known ones. I'm trying to remember what exactly we played. I mean, it wasn't Stella by Starlight, but we definitely played some standards. I think we played Corcovado because Paul liked Brazilian music. He knew some of the Brazilians well, and I love that music too. So it was kind of a mixture, but it was fun.
Did you have a chance to actually go to Harlem when you lived in Connecticut?
I didn't hang out in Harlem. I hung out more on the Lower East Side. So I was in places. I did go to Slugs.
Sure.
And I heard people in there for $3, like Mingus with his band, Wandishi, the Herbie Hancock band, Ornette with Dewey Redman. So it's just a little kind of hole in the wall on the Lower East Side, but that's where I hung out mostly in the Village.
Did you actually sit in there?
No, not there. I played a little bit with David. I ended up playing Sweet Basil with David once in the late 70s, and a few other little clubs in the Village over the years, sure.
What's that? If you, when you talk about playing with Friesen for the first time in like 15 years, just from that point of like the feel, does that, because people will say, I may not see the person or connect or jam with them for many years, but that same old feeling comes back.
That's right. It doesn't go away. So we have enough history together that time in between gigs really doesn't matter. So we played quite a bit for about 7 years in the late 70s. So the connection's still there. And we were playing actually all standards for that particular gig with David's regular drummer now, Charlie Doggett, who's a very good drummer. And he and David have a long history now in David's trio with Joe Mann.
Doggett goes back to where?
Charlie's from the Northwest, and he and David have been playing probably for more than 10 years together now in various combinations. The current group is with Joe Mann on saxophone, so it's tenor bass drums. And Charlie's a wonderful drummer. And we played a little club up in Salem, Oregon that's a listening room, kind of like where we are tonight. And people liked it, and I think we're going to do it again.
All I can ask, my only request tonight is that you guys, when it lends itself, you guys stretch to go to the heavens tonight.
Well, we're going to do our best.
And it's so good to reconnect with you. I appreciate
Likewise, Jake. I was happy to know that you're in town, that you're able to come by.
Yeah, man. John Stowell, bless you. Have a great gig, man.
Keep doing what you're doing, Jake.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.